This is the basic introduction to cells. So you just got done reviewing how things go in and out of a cell. So let's just talk about cells in general. So 75 trillion cells make up your body. If you were going to count to a trillion, you do one count every second. It would take you 33 years to count to a trillion. It would only take you 11 days to count to a million. So a trillion is a lot. Now, they've never actually counted the number of cells in a human body, because obviously it matters what size you are, but this is kind of what they've come up with, an average based on the size of organs. So there are 200 basic types of cells. Cells have some things in common. So in lab, you're learning about the cell and what the parts, where the parts are, and you're going to learn about what the parts do in lecture. But even though a lot of them have the same structures, they do different things. So each cell has kind of its own song. These are blood cells. Red blood cells do their thing. They carry oxygen. These are platelets. They help with blood clotting. And then you have white blood cells that actually will deal with immunity. So they're all cells, but they have slightly different functions. And that's based on their DNA and how their genetics show itself. All right, so just some examples of cells. These are sperm cells, just a little trivia here. Sperm are the smallest human cell that exists. These are red blood cells. They are unique in the sense that they don't have a nucleus, and you will learn why later. This is an ovum. This is the rarest cell in the human body, and this is not in correct size. The ovum is the largest human cell. It's also the rarest. So when men do sperm donations, they get paid a little bit of money, but not a lot. If a woman does ovum donations or egg donations, she gets lots and lots of money. There are a lot of side effects to doing that donation, but it is rare, and it would take several thousand sperm cells to make up an ovum. These are bone marrow cells. You hear about those a lot with bone marrow transplants, which we'll also talk about later. They are actually the adult stem cells that can develop into different types of blood cells, whether it's red, white, or platelets. And the last one is going to be neurons. These are they're all throughout your body, but predominantly in your brain, in your spinal cord. You'll notice they look very different than the other cells here. They have these long extensions that allows them to talk to each other through what are called neurotransmitters, and you will learn about that later also. Okay, so types of cells. I just want to go through some definitions here so you have it. Totipotent cells have the ability to become a total organism. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip back and forth between these two slides. So fertilization happens. Here's the ovum, here's the sperm. The sperm fertilizes the egg. What will happen is they will then start going through mitosis. Mitosis, you go from one cell to two cells. 2 cells to 4 cells to 8 cells, and so on. And at this level right here, where you just have this clump of cells, these cells are totipotent cells. And what that means is if they took, let's say we had the 4-cell clump right here, and we took each of those 4 cells and split them up and put them into a petri dish and let them go through mitosis and then implant them into an organism, you would get 4 identical organisms. They would be totipotent cells. They have ability to become the whole organism, the total organism. In that case, they would be identical. Very rare to get quadruplets that are identical. I'm taping this or filming this, whatever you want to call it, in May of 2020, and there was just identical quadruplets that were born. So that's very, very rare, 1 in several million, to have them be identical. Okay, so those are totipotent cells. They have the ability to become the whole organism. Now, pluripotent cells, and these are embryonic stem cells, have the ability to become different tissue types of an organism. So when we look at this, you'll start to see this as it continues to go through mitosis. You'll see this thing called a blastocyst, and this would be in the fallopian tubes of the female after fertilization. And so now you have these cells around the outside and then these cells in the center that are called the inner cell mass. If you took a cell from this blastocyst, it could not become the whole organism. But if you took cells from this inner cell mass, and this is what would become the developing embryo, these cells are pluripotent. They have the ability to become tissues, different tissue types of the organism. And these are where embryonic stem cells come from, this inner cell mass. So we couldn't take this cell and have it become a whole organism. But If we had the cell and we knew what protein signals to give it, we could then convert it into different tissue types, like brain cells, which might help with Parkinson's disease, heart cells, which could help with a congestive heart failure, a weakening of the heart. We could develop pancreas cells that would then help a person with diabetes. So these are pluripotent cells, and these are embryonic stem cells. So go back to the slide. Embryonic stem cells are pluripotent. They're gotten from the inner cell mass of a blastocyst. They are not gotten from abortions. Just know that a lot of people will say that, but they're not. Where they get these blastocysts are from in vitro fertilization clinics, where people have gone in with assistance with getting pregnant, and they put the egg and sperm together in a petri dish. These blastocysts developed. Then what they will do is they will actually freeze those and then use those over time to help the couple get pregnant. If there are extras, and a lot of times there are, they can sometimes usually be thrown out, or the parents can agree to donate it for science. And that's where these embryonic stem cells are coming from, that they are using to try to develop these different tissue lines that can be used to help with different diseases. So embryonic stem cells can be controversial. It should be easy to understand where they're coming from. This inner cell mass has the ability to become a full person. And so if you believe that this inner cell mass has personhood, then you would be many times against embryonic stem cells. If you believe that personhood occurs later in development, then you might support embryonic stem cell research. So it just depends on people's beliefs that this is an ethical question of whether we should use embryonic stem cells. But there is another type of cell called adult stem cells. And we all have these within our body. They're rare cells in the body that can produce different types of cells or different types of tissues, primarily cells. So there are blood stem cells. These bone marrow cells that I talked about earlier, some of these are adult stem cells because they have the ability to become different types of cells within the blood. So they can become red blood cells, they can become white blood cells, or they can become what are called platelets. Now these are rare, there's not a lot of them in your body. So what researchers are trying to do, and they're having some success, is, these are pluripotent cells like we've talked about, is using adult stem cells and trying to convert them to a different type of cell. So taking a blood stem cell and kind of reverting it back chemically to an embryonic stem cell, and then converting it to the type of cell that you're trying to develop, whether it's a brain cell or a heart cell or whatever. So again, taking a adult stem cell, converting it back to an embryonic stem cell, and then converting that into the tissue type that you want. They've even taken skin cells from a person, converted those back to embryonic stem cells, and then taken those and developed them into a tissue type like pancreatic cells to help cure diabetes. So there's several different options now that exist, which is good because it takes away using those embryonic stem cells, so you get away from some of the ethical issues. So sometime in your life, you may hear about someone donating the blood from the umbilical cord of their child. What they are donating is the blood from the umbilical cord has a lot of adult stem cells. So yes, people think little baby, those cells are embryonic, but they're not. They're adult stem cells, and they're blood stem cells. So they can be used to help people that have diseases like leukemia. They can take the person with leukemia and they can give them these new stem cells, which become a new blood system for them. It's much more complicated than that. So a lot of adult stem cells are found in umbilical cord blood, so it's always good if you can to donate them. Some hospitals offer that, some hospitals do not. It just depends. So this is, again, was just an overview of types of cells. We talked about types of cells, how many you have, totipotent versus pluripotent, embryonic stem cells versus adult stem cells, and the uses for them, and a little bit on the controversy behind them. Okay, I will see you soon on another video, or actually maybe even in class.